James Harrison, welcome to Fireside Chats. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Martin. It's very nice to speak with you.
Likewise. Well, look, for the benefit of the audience, we always love to start with a quick introduction on yourself. You've got an interesting background in value and where you've taken value, and would love just a quick intro.
Started my career in the British Army. That led me into the world of consulting, initially in secure establishments and construction, but then later into the world of technology. So BPO, big FTSE 250 type companies. Most latterly, over the last sort of 7 to 8 years, the value component has probably been the biggest piece of the activities I've been undertaking. I spent time with DXC, but first in business change and benefits realization. So looking at how do you drive value out of transformation programs, before then undertaking a role as the EMEA lead with one of the subsidiaries, Virtual Clarity, where I was building business cases around the transformation from on-prem to cloud, and so data center consolidations, tech refreshes, that sort of thing, and how do you establish value out of that. And then moved to a company called IFS Software, where I was leading the southwest of Europe and Latin America for business value engineering, basically looking at the understanding of value from the use of the software programs within the IFS portfolio. That gave me a bit of time out then over the last couple of years to do a bit of work with some consultancies, work with some startups, write a children's book.
On business value, nonetheless.
No, yeah, not in that case, more on the value of design, what's the right word for it? The value of purpose and being clear on the direction of travel you want to undertake as an individual. But no, moving that aside, I've most recently started with British Telecom as part of the Chief Strategy Officer's team, where I'm helping the international team with their transformation programs and making sure that they're delivering the value that they need to achieve when they're moving themselves from their current state to the future state over the next 3 years. It's about $1 billion worth of portfolio.
You cut your teeth on probably the most complex area of business value, right? Just from what it's like you weren't messing around.
No, I think it was obvious to me, being ex-military, that you have to have a purpose and an intent. And traditional project managers and the sort of project approach focus on short-term delivery. You have a scope of work within a program or a transformation program, project, etc., which is to deliver laptops onto someone's desk or install a piece of software into a system, consolidate a series of technology capabilities, whatever it is. But ultimately, that is an enabler of an outcome that the business or the organization is seeking. And the outcome is supposed to drive value. Now, that value could be with the people, or it could be as part of the P&L. There is a purpose behind that change. And if you can communicate and understand that, you've got a much better chance of delivering it. It's very hard to deliver something you're not clear on. So that's how I sort of fell into the world of value, because to understand it gives you the ability to deliver against it.
That's a really interesting, and now that you say it, sounds pretty obvious, but it's a really interesting perspective on any type of project delivery, which is a lot of the times you're right, people will focus on the project management to deliver on a set of tasks, but they will oftentimes forget actually the main purpose of that project is to drive value in some way, shape, or form. And it's almost like people will do it for the purpose, for the sake of doing it, as opposed to for the sake of realizing value. It feels like a really nuanced but important difference.
And I think it comes back to my military training and something that you get taught very early as a young leader of people within the military at any level, whether that be as a soldier or a corporal or up into the senior ranks of officers. You get taught to examine what the intent is of the person above you and the person above them. So it's the one up and the two up philosophy. And what's your part to play in that? When you're delivering a project or you're delivering a program with sub-projects or a major transformation across an organization, you have a part to play. Understanding how your part fits into that wider connectivity and your boss's intent or your boss's boss's intent. So that could be the CEO or it could be the board or the shareholders. Knowing how you fit within that allows you to steer to deliver those outcomes that is
Totally.
expected on you, and therefore the value that is hoped to be achieved.
Yeah. So just diving deeper into the project value, it is one of those areas that people often don't really pay attention to or don't really understand which seems a bit obvious. As I said before, I'd love you to dive deeper into that.
I think project value is a bit of the bigger piece. It's about understanding again the nuance of the why. I think it's said by many people that you should start with why as part of your questioning, and I think it is a fundamental question. Why am I doing something, but also what am I trying to achieve? The value is a what at both a tactical and a strategic level. You get value within a project in terms of delivering those tactical outcomes, may it be delivering a laptop to someone's desk, but then the next layer of value beyond that is how that piece of technology, that laptop, is used by an organization. And then how does that add value to an individual within their role or to the wider organization? And I think you've got to be able to ask those questions to be able to articulate value, but also to understand why things matter, what makes them important, and therefore why should there be a focus of prioritization? Why should we be tracking those benefits and those outcomes? Because if we can communicate those effectively again, then we can get people to buy into it, we can get people to understand their parts to play, and we can remove those blockers, but expand the level of that value beyond that initial tactical delivery.
In a traditional company on the buy side, who's in charge of assessing the value of a business transformation program? Because there isn't historically a traditional role to measure internal value of initiatives, is there?
No, I don't think there is. I think it's an area that lacks. I think you often think, well, because it's got a capex and opex inclusion, then it's going to fall to the CFO. If it's a technology-based transformation, it probably falls to the CIO. Ultimately, both of them have a part to play in that. And the CEO also has an equal part to play in that, because ultimately they're driving value for their stakeholders, the shareholders, for communities and society, for the employees. I don't think it is tracked or managed at a holistic level under a specific role. Maybe the chief transformation officer or the chief strategy officer would own that in some instances. But I think, fundamentally, again, value should be owned by everybody. You have to take somebody who is going to be a benefits owner to be able to realize them. They've got to be the person that helps drive it, they sponsor it, they champion it, which means then you've got to be able to identify them and articulate them and get people to be on board with pushing that forward. So that means you've then got to have a framework around it and clearly understand the outcomes that you're trying to deliver. And that makes it then a much more complicated process. And people who don't understand that then shy away from it. And you revert back to the traditional sort of project approach of, I'm just going to move myself from point A to point B, and therefore the value must be delivered because I have delivered that laptop to someone's desk.
It's really interesting because every single one of these interviews I've had have been a sell side role in business value, consulting, engineering. Oftentimes it's a hypothetical process, right? Because you're building an assumed value prior to actually delivering it. So you're kind of calculating what is a hypothetical value we can deliver with some pretty, strong assumptions. And you're hoping that you're going to get, fall within it, maybe 20% margin of error. But on the actual delivery of a program, of a project transformation, which is probably some of the more complex, we haven't had that kind of a conversation. But arguably, there's a lot of subjectivity to establishing what is it. You talked about laptops, right? Imagine you have a construction company, right? Imagine 1,000 staff across many different sites, and you build a business case around arming them with a tablet to help them, assess. I have no idea, but everything regarding a construction, and you make a business case around why it should be. How do you assess the value of arming each individual with a tablet, right? With that piece of hardware.
I think there's two parts to that. There's the conceptual value, as you say, that you would create as part of the business case. But then there's the true value through delivery. The conceptual part would be hypothetical, as you identify. So you're going to start looking at, productivity gains, headcount reductions, potentially being able to free people's time up to be more strategic. directors and senior people, freeing their time up to allow them to focus on the strategic aspects of the business may help you with business growth. And you may say, well, actually, if I can give another 2 hours a week to my directors, they can do more business development, and that's going to generate X amount of revenue, et cetera, et cetera. Again, all of those are hypothetical until they start to be delivered against. And that's where often that sort of post-delivery falls down, because the business moves on to its next stage of transformation or delivery of something else. Projects have been ticked off as being delivered, so I'm now going to focus on my next project. And the business then fails to retrospectively continue to track those metrics and say, okay, did I truly realize 2 hours a week for those directors to be able to be more strategic? Are they now generating more business revenue by working on more business development and therefore bringing more revenue into my business? How much is that? Did it stand up against my business case? Was I accurate, so that I can now leverage those same metrics within future business cases? Those sort of things generally don't happen because I've signed off the check, I've paid the supplier. Right, I now need to concentrate on the next crocodile closest to the boat, rather than thinking, actually, did I actually deliver against the promises that I made? I think it's a very complex and nuanced world that it requires people to actually be dedicated against. It's one of those things, a bit like business change. Business change often is an element of transformation within programs that people forget about or do sort of half-hearted, because it doesn't have a financial quantifiable value to it whilst it's being undertaken. You only see the benefit of it after the fact, by which time you go, oh, that was great, I spent the money right, or it all went wrong, in which case they didn't. If you do the same for business value engineering, again, it's something that you would benefit from when you see the benefits.
Yeah.
You don't benefit from it during delivery, but actually I can, instead of spending money on two people doing the value engineering bit and truly understanding and articulating that, I could spend those two salaries on two more architects, and those architects can generate me revenue because I can build them out to a client, or I can use them as part of the program and shorten the life of my program. Whatever it is, you can clearly articulate the difference between cost and an outcome, whilst value engineering being slightly more nebulous and being after the fact is much harder to quantify and see the investment value in.
And on the buy side, on the client side, which is where you are now, right? You report into the CIO office. You said
it's Chief Strategy Office.
Chief Strategy Office. The role there is effectively based on any given project. Your role is to effectively assess the value of that.
So I'm working on several transformation programs. I've got 11 transformation programs that I'm engaged with at the moment across the business at an international level. My role is to, one, coach, mentor, guide the wider transformation team on how to undertake those transformation programs, but two, to make sure that they have plans and strategies in place to deliver the outcomes that those programs are supposed to be delivering.
Connecting the expected outcomes to...
Exactly. The business has a strategy in terms of what it wants to do in the marketplace, what its competitors are doing, how it's going to compete against those, and it also needs to continue to shift and evolve so that it stays modern and current and meets its customers' expectations. So there's a series of deliverable outcomes there that it's got to achieve, both financial and operational. Now, to deliver those, it has transformation programs. Those transformation programs are underpinned by projects. Those projects need to deliver value outcomes. If they're not delivering value outcomes, then it's time, resource, and money spent on something that isn't adding value. And across the nearly multi-million pound programs that are happening on a daily basis, you can't afford to waste that sort of money. So therefore, it's got to be focused on outcomes, not on tactical delivery.
It's a really interesting, how do I put it, approach, because effectively what you're doing is you're providing true context to a team who is implementing a project or program to understand the reason why they're doing it, as opposed to the just doing it. So if starting with the end in mind, right? This is the value that we expect from this. By them having a very clear view of the desired outcome, you're giving them a much stronger ability to exercise better judgment in certain decisions that guide to that outcome.
Absolutely. It is outcomes focused. The direction of conversation and direction of those transformation programs is to focus on the right hand side of the Gantt chart. the end in mind against that strategic intent. What are the outcomes, those values, either financial or operational, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve? And therefore, what do I need to do to achieve that? Where are the composite parts? Be it the ones that I have to deliver within my program or project work stream, but also the ones that are tied to other program or project work streams. What are the questions I'm asking of the business and the decisions I need along the way to get me there? And if I don't deliver those on time, or someone doesn't deliver that to me on time, what is the value impact that has? Be it either a slip to the right in terms of timeline and therefore resources needing to be able to bring me back on track and a cost to the business in that regard, or if it's a cost reduction type program, does that mean I'm going to achieve those metrics that are going to impact my EBITDA? Am I going to achieve the financial numbers for the next quarter, the next year, the next 3 years? And if that is going to be impacted, again, what am I doing about it, and how do I make sure I achieve that value outcome that I'm aiming for?
Well, the approach to calculating would probably be very similar. How would you explain the difference between being on the sales side of generating business cases as a vendor and being on the buy side of generating either the business case to drive an initiative, or the assessing the value realized from an initiative?
I don't think there is a massive difference between the two, as you highlight. I think they are very similar. I think ultimately it comes down to the OKRs and KPIs that you need to measure against. Those need to be agreed up front. They need to be clearly baselined, clearly articulated, and able to be measured as you move along. You've got to be able to see a change in them. Creating an OKR or a KPI for the sake of a business case, I've seen it happen. It doesn't work because you can't track it after the fact. So you've got to use something that is tangible and understood by the business, and that will shift and change. If it doesn't shift and change, then that might be purposeful, yes. But the chances are, if you want to see delivery making an impact, you need to have measures that are going to adjust. Now, they could be positive, they could also be negative. It doesn't matter that you measure things that are going the wrong direction, because again, that allows you to steer the ship more effectively. But it may also be intentional to see one or two or more KPIs or OKRs going the wrong direction because they aren't the priority and you expect those to worsen, but actually the ones that you're focusing on are improving. Again, the difference I think is that when you're looking at it from a pre-sale sales perspective, you are picking more hypothetical numbers, but when you actually go into delivery, you've now fixed those as part of your business case and the projected outcomes that you anticipated. If you do it on the pre-sales side, you can pick them. You can sign up to it. Someone can sign the check. If you're a salesperson, it doesn't really matter after the fact if they deliver it or not. It's if you've got your bonus, you're walking out the door. Thank you very much. Customer might not be so happy, but at that level, that nuance is there. I think, and that is an area where actually the connection probably could be better.
Yeah, it is fascinating because we often find that outcomes or variables will evolve once rubber meets the road, once a project commences, right? And actually, there should be an expectation that we will identify either new outcomes or realize that ones that we thought would be important are actually less important. And it's actually part of the process because you can really understand where is this project going and what is the direction it's taking. Should we let it take that course, or should we course correct, right?
I think, that works on both sides, to be fair. I think you see that within programs and projects as well, where directors or even project managers can find something that they particularly want to hang their hat on, and something may change in the business, or even to a degree, the initial business case internally is about having a pet project. Oh, I really want to implement this piece of software because I really love it. It's got all of this value, but it doesn't tie to the strategic intent, and it gets through the business case, and then the program just keeps on delivering against that business case and the project plan because somebody loved it. And actually, the continuation of delivery of value isn't there anymore. But well, I've got it. We said we were going to spend the money on it. Great. Now it's a useful piece of software that nobody really uses, which sort of ties to that after the fact value piece that should always be undertaken is did you deliver against the value, and does it continue to stack up? But tracking that through the journey is also equally important. Am I on track to deliver value? Have I got short-term benefits that are falling out as I go through my program, as much as the
Exactly.
longer-term benefits and objectives that I'm seeking?
James, this is super interesting. I'd love to continue like for hours. I think there's a lot of value in understanding it from the other side, and maybe I'll grab you offline for some some additional questions. Before we wrap up, you worked in this space for quite a while, and you worked on the vendor side and on the client side. In terms of sales reps that you may have worked with or partnered with on the value side, who would you say is the best sales account exec or sales rep you've worked with?
I think the one that stands out the most to me is a gentleman called Thomas Calpio, who I worked with many, many years ago. He wouldn't necessarily be your traditional value person from a business value engineering perspective or medical or any of those sort of acronyms and things that people talk about. What he did do, though, was clearly understood the need to establish value across the entire value chain of an engagement with a client. So not just during the sales process, but also through the delivery and post-delivery and the business change elements that were part of that. So outside of the product that he was selling or the conversation we'd be having with the client, he'd also be looking at the wider impact across the business and to the people
Right.
and to the organization, and to have those conversations both with myself and with the wider team members internally and externally on how that value component tied all the way through, because he again was always focused on what is it the customer is trying to achieve, not how do I solve the problem with my solution that I've got in my kit bag, but actually what is the problem, and now how do we leverage everything we've got to deliver against that. And that meant that he was looking from start to finish and then post delivery. And I always felt that was a very effective way of building trust and reputation with the client, but also making sure that value was underpinning everything that was discussed.
It's a great skill as a sales exec to have that, for sure. James, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed our chat today. Thanks for making it.
No problem. Thank you, Martin.